Hello and welcome to the official podcast of the Cleveland International Film Festival, SIF Speaks, sponsored by Wayside Furniture. SIF 45 Streams is underway, and you'll have a lot of films to choose from during the next several days. Here on SIF Speaks, we'll help you sort them out. I'm Dee Perry, and I'm joined by my producer and co-host, Aaron Spears. Hey, Aaron.
Hey Dee, it has begun. There's so much going on through April 20th. We've got hundreds of films, filmmaker conversations, Q&As, audience voting, filmmaker awards, happy hours, podcast episodes.
Yep, I know. It can be hard to know where to start, but one destination that's proven to be a favorite entry point, not just for film goers, but for filmmakers, is on our list today. Our guest is a SIF staff member who has the enviable job of choosing and scheduling the films that many filmmakers use to begin or advance their careers, the shorts. Joining us now is SIF's Short Films Programming Manager, Paul Sloop. Welcome back to SIF Speaks, Paul.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, before we dig into this year's SIF streams, take us back to last year's. What were some of the first tasks you had to take on after the in-person cancellation?
Well, the first task was to sort of recover from the heartbreak of what is something we love to do so much. And I think, thankfully, the fact that we did pivot made that heartbreak and recovery a little easier because we quickly got to work on getting everything that needed to get done to make it happen. No one was happier than I when Bill Gensler reached out and said, okay, so we have a plan if you're down with this. We need to contact all those filmmakers again and say, hey, is it okay if we do this? Now, as the shorts programmer, my job was much easier than the feature team because the shorts filmmakers were very likely to be down with this idea of, okay, we're going to go online with it. And we were so early in that process, it's much easier now. We were so early in that process that filmmakers, and particularly feature films, it was very unsure as to, can we do this? Are we going to damage the long-term benefits of our film streaming on Netflix and things like that? So really, our first and major task was to reach out to all those filmmakers. Thankfully, we were in a position with CineSend having all of our content in hand. We had it in a place where it needed to be to make it possible. So now we needed approval. So for me, it was 200 plus emails that I had sent once, starting that all over. I remember it well. I started Saturday morning after Bill said, yep, we've got the go ahead, send them. And I, much like I usually do early in the process, started sending out the emails to each and every filmmaker. And we do it individually so that we can have a separate thread for every filmmaker to communicate
Wow.
with. So
that's a lot of information to be juggling, I would think. Were you able to keep most of the filmmakers you had booked or all of the short filmmakers that you had booked?
We lost very few shorts, less than a dozen for sure. I want to say it was single digits because there were only a few that had conflicts because they already had deals with Netflix and that prohibited them going online. That would eventually change. But we were like, this was the very beginning. We were like one of the first festivals trying to say, we're going to take our whole festival online. So filmmakers and companies didn't know how they were going to respond to that yet. But, obviously, almost every festival has been online since then, and many of those details got worked out. Thankfully, on my end, I only lost a few shorts to issues like that.
So once you had the okays, then what? How did you decide to present the shorts online? I mean, could you curate as you did in theaters with special programs, or did they have to be individual offerings? What kind of framework did you build?
Well, I guess one of the hidden or silver linings of this was that we were able to offer for our members, our pass holders, access to individual films, shorts if they wanted to. But the reality is we like presenting the shorts just the way we do. It's how I fell in love with shorts, seeing them in programs with all the different elements in each program. So we put it up just the way we had it. We put those programs online in the same order. And most of our ticket buyers, that's the way they address the shorts programs. They saw it, the same program they would have seen in the theaters.
So now, a year later, we're prepping for, or we're in the middle of SIF 45 being all online, all streaming. You've got all that experience, like you said, plus the filmmakers now have an experience of having a year of festival submissions. So how did your search in an all digital environment play out this year as you went out looking for short films?
I traveled all over the world from the comfort of my living room. I will say the one thing I did very early on, I bought an 82-inch TV so that I could see everything as big as possible. Like the closest I can do is get the biggest TV I can find. This will replace my travel budget this year. Instead, I'm getting a big screen and bringing it home. And I set that baby up in my living room, and my kids love me so much for that
Oh,
thing.
I bet.
But yeah, I went to festivals, all these festivals that were online like us. I attended and watched shorts just like I would in a normal year, and it's still not the same, not even close,
Right.
because I don't get an audience response to the film, which is what is a valuable tool in determining which shorts we want to select and invite to submit to Cleveland. But still, the opportunity was there to see a lot of films and connect with filmmakers. There were several festivals that I was on their jury or on a panel, and that gave you the opportunity to interact via Zoom or whatever other technology and platforms they used. So, that's what it was. It was all from the comfort of my own living room.
To give it kind of a positive spin too, was this an? It seems like there's potential to visit more festivals since it was virtual. You didn't have to physically travel. Did you get to more festivals this year?
Absolutely, absolutely. I usually go to 3 or 4 a year, and I attended a dozen or more festivals. I didn't track the number, but I attended quite a few, way more than I would have in person.
And when we talked about this a couple of years ago, you mentioned that for I think 2019, you had just received over 3,000 submissions, mostly through Vimeo links. So how about this year's submissions? How did the numbers and the methods of submitting compare?
So I think one of the very interesting things that happened was, I think most of us in the festival world had an expectation that, oh boy, what films are we going to have to choose from? And we saw maybe a 10% reduction in submissions. My numbers are not very much lower than they were last year, which normally I'd be like, oh, they're lower. But the fact that they were so close to the same number was like celebration. And the submission process for us was the same because we accept everything through Film Freeway. That's the way most festivals are functioning. There are other platforms, but so for filmmakers, there was no change that way. I would throw in a little note here that though the submissions were a little lower, is that the overall quality was higher. I found myself as the year went on thinking, okay, so here's what COVID did. Amateurs did not spend time making film. They did something else. They spent time trying to figure out. But the pros who knew what to do with a camera, knew how to adapt to this, they kept making movies. They found ways to make particularly shorts. And, so the quality overall was higher, which made the process of picking what wasn't going to make the festival even harder. There were just so many good films to choose from still.
Yeah, let's detour there for a second and talk about how hard it is to pick. I mean, do you fall in love with a lot of films?
It is the hardest part of the process. The most heartbreaking time is when we have that final meeting and we select the films, and then you look at the list, the first 20 to 100 films that they were on that list and they were equal in the debate when we started. But you have to figure out filling all those elements. Like I said, we like to play programs that have a little bit of everything: animation, documentary, comedies, dramas. We make sure that every program has that. So we're looking for films in all those different genres. But at the end, you end up leaving such amazing work behind. And, I become very attached to the films and the filmmakers in the process. So it's really personal and heartbreaking at the end of that process. So I just do the best I can to reach out to the filmmakers and tell them, not only are we sorry you didn't get your film into the festival, but we want to acknowledge the work is great and we can't wait to see what you do next.
And you touched on the level, I mean, or I should say the amount of film that you watch, but you can't possibly do that all by yourself. So you have a team, yes?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have between 150 and 200 screeners that work for us that are volunteers and do amazing work. We make sure that every short film is seen by at least 3 people. Those 3 people score the films. I'm monitoring Film Freeway all the time, to see when we get to 3 scores on the films, and then I go through those and move all the ones that scored high enough with those 3 people to our programming team. And that's a 5-member team I couldn't do it without them. They are fantastic. Let's see if I can remember the names: Gina Washington, Amanda Kavsek, Sydney, and Jason. So those 4 they're such amazing help to me, because no programmer in their right mind would want to try to make the selections by themselves. You think the Heartbreak's bad now. At least I know that I didn't myself say, nope, I'm going with this one instead of that one. You need as a group to talk it through and figure out how to program, and they're invaluable. So, and everybody is. That whole process couldn't work without the amazing group of people who come together volunteering to help make this festival what it is. And I fell in love with short films through this festival. So I know what that process looks like, and it's great to be a part of it.
Was one of those people on the screening team. I've noticed in the small amount of shorts that I see compared to what you're watching, I tend to notice some content and narrative trends year in year out. With all of the stuff that you screened or that you saw, or the team itself, I guess too. Did you notice any trends for the films that were selected for this year's festival?
There are two that stick out. One is social justice. Makes sense. So much going on in the world throughout this past year. Lots of films, documentaries in particular, about border issues, about Black Lives Matter. Really good. I mean, really good stuff. So that was one of the trends, and making it was really difficult to choose which of those, because there were way more than we could play, and we're playing quite a few. And the other trend is, even though the themes weren't always there, you could tell that this was a COVID made film because you saw smaller casts, one location
Oh,
films,
sure.
and they did creative things. But, if you're someone who understands a little bit how this worked after doing 20 years of
Yeah.
watching short films and seeing so many more films that have small casts, one location, you're like, this is how you respond to COVID. You tighten it up and go one room, two people, you sit over there, you sit over there, and we're going to have some great dialogue and create some tension. And we had the pleasure of sharing one that I thought was ideal as our bonus film at Get Shorty. We played it, Adventures at Home. Imagination is Everything. It's just a delightful film that's good for everybody, but speaks directly to what we've all been going through, especially families at home with kids. It's a wonderful film, and I hope everybody gets a chance to see it sometime through the festival.
You just touched on Get Shorty, which is a pre-festival event that includes audience participation. Talk a bit about how that works and how the audience this year responded.
Well, it's the first time we did it virtually, which was both scary and exciting because there's a live element of it. We can't pre-record the results. It's they vote, and then someone has to come on and say, okay, here's how you voted. And just like theater that I'm involved with, you test run, you do a rehearsal and everything goes wrong, and you do another rehearsal and still you don't get everything right, and you're like, I don't know if this is going to come together. And then and then it's showtime, and it's like, oh, and we did it. So it's I don't know if there's just some element to, okay, you have to do it now, that makes everybody go, I'm not messing up, but
Right.
it really worked well. And in the end, the response to Get Shorty has been growing. We've moved from venue to venue because of the growth and success of it. And I think it's nearly 1,000 people participated in Get Shorty this year. And we were getting close to that at Playhouse Square. We'd moved to Playhouse Square before. I think the entire team will say, we can't wait to get back in person. There's just nothing like it. But at the same time, to know that even more people could participate, that's the silver lining, that there are people who there's no way they're going to make it downtown for one reason or another, that were able to participate and Get Shorty. And I'm sure as a team, we're always going to be looking now for, okay, how can we do both? How can we do the live and find a way to still engage those who can't come physically? Because I think all festivals are realizing the silver lining of this whole COVID thing is that we've discovered there are other audiences that are very interested in what we're doing that just can't come physically, that are limited, whether it's distance, just a little too far away, or just travel issues, that will participate. And I think, we as a team and most festivals are going to look for ways to keep some element of virtual as part of our festivals moving forward.
And as Clevelanders, there's always that snowstorm that happens in March and April.
Yeah, we had a festival a few years ago. The filmmakers like, okay, I arrived and it was 68. Then it snowed 3 days later. It's like, yeah, we can do everything. At the time of our festival, we could have every potential weather pattern happen in the 12 days of our festival.
But you touched on something that I want to dig a little deeper into, and that's the loss. It's a real thing of the drama and the communal energy that comes from a festival audience being in the same theater viewing the same film. And And have you come up with fixes or suggestions on how to recreate some of that energy in the online setting?
Well, that's one of the great gifts of getting to do it a second time that not in 4 weeks is that we are blessed in this city to have the team that runs this festival. And I'm not talking about me. We have a full-time staff there that does incredible work that makes it possible for me to get to do what I do with shorts and that. But if everybody knew the hours that are going into trying to make this festival feel like our real festival, I tell you, we work nonstop to put this together every year, and it's even more this year with the meetings that are happening on Zoom and that to say, okay, so how can we recreate the lobby? How can we recreate Q&As? As a matter of fact, one of the things we've done is pre-recorded 24 roundtables for each of our shorts programs so that we can involve those filmmakers from all over the world and introduce them to our audience. And that is one of the silver linings of this is that even more filmmakers can be involved. And hopefully it's something we'll find a way to incorporate even when we are able to come back in person. Having said that, I've been telling filmmakers in different sessions I've been involved with this year, when you're able to go back in person, you need to come because there's nothing like experience what happens at our festival and with our audiences. We have such great audiences, and that's the gift that we can give filmmakers is to come and put them together.
I was curious if there's a mechanism for, if there was last year, if there is this year, for audiences to respond in something like real time to what they're watching online.
Well, we didn't have any of that last year in the 4 week pivot, but we are definitely working on things this year. We're working to put together some programs that will happen in real time and give an audience an opportunity to interact with at least a limited number of guests that we can do that with, just for exactly what you're saying, because that's the element that is missing with our pre-recorded Q&As. Obviously, that wasn't an opportunity that we could do. We know from experience what those typical questions are for the shorts filmmakers, so that's what we did with those. But that's why we are doing some events this year that will be live and in real time and give an audience the opportunity to interact with us.
Shifting perspectives just for a moment, from a filmmaker perspective, the Cleveland International Film Festival is one of a very few across the country that are an official nominating festival for Short Film Academy Awards, which, off memory, that's live action, documentary, and animation. What's the journey? What's SIF's step in that whole process then?
So, first of all, it's really important to the filmmakers. It makes us. That's one of the periods of time in our history where you saw a huge jump in the number of submissions to our festival from the shorts perspective, because that's one of the first things that filmmakers attempt to target. Now, I think it's a little silly because the odds of winning an Oscar as a short film, when you consider all the short films, are really low. And all of us programmers that when we're in panels say, do not set out to win an Oscar with a short film. Okay, that's not what you should be thinking. Having said that, it's still a big deal to filmmakers because even if that's not their goal, getting into an Oscar qualifying festival says a lot about their film and its festival journey. We all pay attention to what festivals the films are in. One of the things I love about our festival is that we set out to just play the best films we find, and we don't stand there and go, well, it's got to be a world premiere, or it's got to be, the only premiere we ask for is Cleveland. We'd like to be the first person in Cleveland to play your film. So, and I love that because that makes it easy as a programmer to just know that we're putting together the best lineups, not just the best films we could find that are going to play for the first time ever. It's another gift that we're able to give the filmmakers. Ultimately, being an Oscar qualifying festival makes a big deal to the filmmaker getting in here because they can then put up, I was at Cleveland, and that's really worth something out there on the festival circuit when other festivals are considering. And many of our films that get in here immediately get invited to half a dozen festivals. I get emails all the time from filmmakers, just from being in your festival, I've been invited to participate in all these other festivals. So it's a big deal. There are very few of us that are all three categories. It has grown. At the time and for several years, we were one of 19. It's in the mid 20s now because a few festivals have also added, but it's still, when you think globally, that's all there are. It's pretty rare to have that. And so our three Oscar qualifying winners this year will have the opportunity to submit for Oscar consideration. And that's a pretty big deal.
And there has been some success getting the statuette from some of the SIF winners.
Yeah, we're working, I think, year 12 of this now. We've had 4 films win. We've also had 4 films nominated. So I always say, like, look, if you get nominated out of Cleveland, you're winning because we've never got nominated that didn't also win the Oscar. And one of our most recent Oscar-winning film was Period End of Sentence, which we did world premiere, not because we asked for it, because the filmmaker was an alum and wanted to launch with us, did and won, and then won the Oscar. And she's back. She actually has a family doc this year. She co-directed with 2 younger directors this year, and has both a narrative and a family doc this year. So she'll be back with us.
Nice.
Well, before I let you go, I've got to ask, you've seen so many short films, thousands, countless numbers. Do you sometimes imagine what kind of short film you'd make if you were doing it?
Well, it's hard not to. Mostly, I honestly, what you do is when you see the ones that like almost were perfect to you, you really think about what you would have done to just tweak somebody else's film a little bit and know that, I wish I was in the room with you. I've been doing this a long time, and if we just tweak that ending a little bit, you'd play everywhere. And for the longest time, because I'm not a filmmaker, and I actually think that's a benefit to my job because I watch films like audiences do, and I'm not programming for filmmakers. I'm programming for an audience. And having been around a lot of filmmakers, they are so critical of each other's work. They pick each other's films apart for things that audiences do not care or notice at all. So I'm glad that I don't as well. But in having done this so long, now filmmakers who know me will ask for advice that I've always been like, I don't want to say it. I don't make films. I don't know. But I found over the last few years that I'm willing with those filmmakers that I've known and trust to say, what do you think of the script? Okay, I'll give you my thoughts, acknowledging I don't make films. Okay, I could be totally wrong here. Having said that, yeah, the answer to your question is it's not usually what film would I make. It's how would I change your film?
Your inner editor is coming out.
Inner editor. That's exactly it.
We're glad you do what you do. Thank you so much, Paul.
Oh, thank you.
Paul Sloop is the short films programming manager for the Cleveland International Film Festival. SIF 45 streams will be held entirely online now through Tuesday, April 20th, 2021. For more details, log on to the SIF website, clevelandfilm.org. I'm Dee Perry.
And I'm Aaron Spears.
We want to thank our sponsor for this podcast, Wayside Furniture, keeping it local since 1937. We also want to remind you how you can support your local film festival. Please consider a donation to our challenge match presented by Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. Our goal is to reach $145,000 this year to support the future of our festival, and we're grateful for any amount you are able to contribute. To donate, please visit clevelandfilm.org. And thank you for listening to SIF Speaks.